In this session with Michael Dugan, you will learn how to approach podcasting through the eyes of Toastmasters. You will discover you already have the skills you need to be successful as a podcaster. Michael will share some successes and a few failures when he started the road to podcasting. He will also share time-saving techniques and valuable resources to getting started in the world of podcasting, especially during a pandemic. Michael Dugan is a distinguished Toastmaster and also the 2017-2018 District 2 Toastmaster of the Year. He is a chef, a podcaster, and a passionate fly fisherman. He also travels the globe with his wife in search of new adventures. He energizes the world around him in person and virtually through building effective connections. Today, he will share with you lessons learned from podcasting through pathways. Please welcome with me, Michael Dugan. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Can you believe it that all of us are here today to learn about pathways in podcasting? What you may not know is that on May 1st, we launched a podcast honoring chefs and culinary artists. And we couldn't have done it without Toastmasters. We have had over 200 downloads already. And it's really exciting. And all of you are here tonight to share that experience. So I want to ask you in the chat, what did you come here for? Did you come here to learn, one, about podcasting, two, about pathways, three, that you're ready to launch your podcast? You have this idea and you're getting ready and you really want to execute on that and you want to feel inspired and connected? So put in the chat a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 that you're launching your podcast right now, and we can celebrate with you.
Thank you. And we would love to have everyone to share why they showed up tonight. And we are delighted you're spending this evening with us. Looks like we've got some ones. A couple people said 1 and 2. One person kindly said to see you, Michael, which is obviously someone who knows and loves you, to hear your journey.
You.
Excellent. No 4s so far. Is anyone here getting ready to launch a podcast? No?
There's got to be somebody here.
Anyone thinking about it in your wildest dreams, maybe?
Or if you've already launched a podcast.
We have one person who has a 4.
Deep. Fantastic.
2 people that have a 4. Okay, they're coming out of the woodwork. Awesome. So 1s and 2s and some 4s. That's what we've got.
I feel honored to be with all of you and experience or share this experience with you, because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a little bit about podcasting, but we're really going to talk about how pathways can help you create a podcast. So when I thought about this idea, I created Voice for Chefs, but I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of people in Toastmasters that joined in the vision and came together to really make it something special. And what I want to do is just share a little bit of the podcast with you.
Come on in to a place you've never been. Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan from Voice for Chefs of the Pacific Northwest, guiding you through the chef's journey, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters. Now that is what you would hear right now if you went on Spotify, iHeartRadio. Take your phones out and check it out, because it's out there live. We recently released, and we have another success to celebrate. we just got on Apple Podcast, which is challenging to do right now. They're having a lot of technical issues, but reach out there and that's what you would hear. But you wouldn't have always heard that because it really started out as an idea, but it was a mess, a real mess. And as Craig Valentine would say, you want to change a mess into a message and create a message. So tonight, I'm going to share with you how we created a message and created Voice for Chefs. Oops. So when I was thinking about this, I look back to when I grew up. I studied to be a chef for 10 years. I sat with them, learned from them. Many chefs work over 60 hours a week, and they do it because it's their passion and it's their purpose. And I woke up one day with the idea that chefs need a voice. We were struggling last year with the pandemic. And this idea came to me that why not start a podcast? Why not create something where you could share the chef's vision, the chef's story? So that's how this started out. But really how it started out, I want to take you back 9 years. 9 years ago, I was on a radio show called Life Mastery Radio with Todd Allen and Coach Debbie. Jackie Bailey introduced me to them. And it came on the radio show at the very beginning with a BlackBerry and a little tiny earpiece. And I remember this booming voice. Todd comes on, he goes, "Mike, we cannot hear you. Can you speak up a little bit louder?" So when I came on the show, I was screaming with passion and energy. And he said, "If you go out and you buy a boom microphone, we'll bring you back on the show." And he did. So I came back on and I had the time of my life. It was really an amazing experience. And it inspired me to think about starting a podcast. So when you think about that, we're going to cover how a high performance leadership project can lead to a podcast. We're going to talk about how to prevent podcast disasters, not kitchen disasters, but podcast disasters. And we're connect you to the guest experience, because the guest experience, having a guest on your show and having them really have a great experience with your podcast, that is the key to connecting your audience to your podcast. Years ago, I started in Toastmasters, and I thought I really wanted to do a high performance leadership project and something that would be meaningful. And last year, I attended a Pathways seminar, and the seminar was with Kyle Hall. And I remember he said, "Is anyone out there interested in a level 4 or level 5 project with Pathways?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm really interested in jumping in and starting a podcast." So he said, "Well, that's your level 4 project, but your level 5 project, I challenge you to create a high performance leadership project." So I did. I was really inspired. He captured my soul because I was right on the fence about launching a podcast, but I didn't want to do it alone. So I remember talking to Linda Vorthman, who's currently an area director. She's very involved in Toastmaster leadership. She's also the president of digital transformation. And she was really inspiring and really excited about this idea of planning for a podcast. And then Kyle Hall, many of you know. Now he is kind of a funny guy, but kind of a serious guy, as you can see. He was the past District 32 director. he also has a real vision, a high level vision of Toastmasters. And I remember that asking him if he would join the leadership project. And he was really hesitant until I told him that I really have this desire to help chefs share their voice and to come out of the pandemic and feel good about what they're doing and their struggles. Now, we also had Nan Hamilton, and Nan is a life coach. So she has a completely different vision. She is able to take something that you start with and bring it all the way to the finish line. And she's really inspiring. And she knows how to create and pull out those golden nuggets. And then finally, my wife, she's a creative designer and the inspiration for Voice for Chefs. So all of these people came together, and we met 5 times, because typically you meet 5 times for HPL, for an hour per session. And we had this creative brainstorm session every time we met. The things we focused on were the description for the podcast, the introduction for the podcast, which you heard. And what was really amazing about that is that I went out with my wife and connected to the singer, Steve Olson, that you saw at the very beginning. And Steve, he was playing in all these different restaurants in the Seattle area. And he plays 70s music. And it's amazing to hear him. And so I approached him during the pandemic. There were 3 people in the restaurant. And I went over to him with a mask on and I said, Steve, I'm starting this podcast. What do you think? Would you consider writing a song? So he wrote this song. And what I remember is that when we gathered together in the High Performance Leadership Project and we had a committee meeting, we talked about the song. We talked about shaping the song and how it would really create a vision of the podcast so that people could really connect to it. And it was an amazing experience to work with all of these people to create something really special. And we came away with some marketing material on how we could approach guests. And then, aside from developing the plan to launch the podcast, there was gold in those conversations. So the questions that we asked during the High Performance Leadership Project: who are your guests? We dug really deep to try to figure out who our guests were. And what is the audience going to take away? And how do you find your audience? These are all questions that we asked in these conversations, in these meetings that we had. And what we came away with, I remember Kyle had this idea. I was randomly looking for questions to interview chefs. And I came up with all these questions. He goes, take 10 questions and send them to your guest and ask your guest which questions they would like to talk about. Have them pick 2 or 3. And then we brought it forward with, let's have them suggest some more questions. And wouldn't you know that by doing that, the guests were so excited and felt supported to come on the podcast. We also talked about joining groups. How do you find your audience? You join groups on Facebook. You know, because I was doing a podcast to talk about chefs, I went on an international chef Facebook page. And it almost felt like I was kind of spying a little bit, because I was learning about these chefs and their frustrations and their excitement. And I was really getting into the mind of a chef, of an international chef. And it was fascinating to learn, but also to contribute. Another thing, there's a Seattle restaurant support group. And what's amazing about this group, there's a woman named Jill who's the admin for the group. And I found out that she doesn't even work in the industry. She just has a passion to support all these people. There's over 10,000 people in this Facebook group. And I got to learn and came back to my restaurant roots by joining this group, because all these people were frustrated by the pandemic, but then they all pulled together to try to create something with what they had. Some of them were going out of business, but most of them were very resilient to get through the pandemic. So I could really feel the passion of the industry. And these were all suggestions that came out of being in the High Performance Leadership Project. The final one, which was actually my favorite, was to create a Facebook feedback page. And it initially actually turned out it was create a Facebook page. But then when Kyle and Linda and Nan and Carrie, we were collaborating, and the idea is to get a listener base before you launch. So it's basically, you have testers, people that will listen to your podcast, give you feedback, but it's not finished. And what was amazing was I had about 30 people in this feedback group, and they started giving me advice and ideas on how to shape and create and build the podcast. And recently, about a week ago, what we did was we flipped it and we invited the public in. So now it's a live Facebook page that tripled in size within about a week. And so that was really exciting to take away and harvest these ideas. But the other tip I would give you if you're considering a podcast and you're considering doing an HPL for your podcast, I would consider recording it on Zoom, but record it on an application like Otter, because Otter transcribes everything. So what I did was I transcribed the application, and then I actually took notes, looked at the notes, and mined these gems of ideas and then shared them back with our committee. So those are some things that you could do for your own HPL if you're considering launching a podcast. Now, this is kind of interesting. So going along this journey, for me and for many people, the first thing I discovered is that when you pick out a microphone, for example, a lot of people were like, you should get a Yeti microphone. They're really great. So I bought a Yeti. But what I discovered was the Yeti was so noisy because it would pick up all the sounds around you. The door would close, or there's a car driving by, because I live, or the room I'm in is actually, there's a window right next to the computer. So a car drives, honks his horn. I'm recording a podcast. You can hear it. And then you have to spend hours trying to edit that sound out, unless you're fortunate enough to be able to hire a sound engineer. But I can tell you about podcasting, you may not be able to do that. So the next thing, I went from a Yeti to a Shure MV7 microphone. And this is a really great microphone because it ties into my voice, but also within 12 inches of the microphone, it doesn't pick up any outside sound. So we have planes that go by our house. And I used to have to stop recording with the chef and say, we're just going to wait for 5 minutes and talk, just talk for a little bit, then we'll start up again. But what I realized is by switching over to the Shure MV7, I wouldn't have to do that. The other thing that you want to consider is your room. Like, where are you going to be? Is your room going to have carpet? Are you going to have things around you that are making noise? So what a lot of people do is they hide in the closet, meaning that they go in their walk-in closet or they go into a closet because there's clothes and there's basically, you can put blankets up and things like that that will create a soundproof room. So a lot of people are closet podcasters. And then finally, what gets recorded gets rewarded. Craig Valentine said that. And I love that, except there's a twist on that right now. Imagine that you've got this amazing chef and you're so excited to actually record with them. And you come online and you forget to hit the record button. I've done that. And when I did that, I remember that I was fortunate enough because they were having a sound problem. So we rebooted the computer and we started over and I hit the record button. So these are some things to consider and try to avoid. But if you go out on the web right now and think about joining the Buzzsprout Facebook group, they have over 20,000 podcasters. And what's amazing, all of them are so helpful and so encouraging. When I launched, I had about 50 people congratulate me. So if you're thinking about it and you're just on the fence, jump into that Facebook group and you'll get tremendous support. And there's lots of resources out there. I'm going to share a lot after this presentation. I've got a lot of really good resources on audio and different places you can go to start your podcast. And finally, I want to share a little bit about the guest experience, which I think is really important to make your guests feel comfortable. And we as Toastmasters have this skill that we've worked on for so long. But I've had chefs come in, they're so nervous. You could hear in your episode, you could hear 30 ahs, 40 ums. But if you spend a little bit of time with them and do the coaching that we learn with the skills that we already have, you can create this amazing guest experience. So when you look here, we've got several chefs that are here. So this is Clara, Chef Jessica, Kelsey, and right here's La Spiga. And then we have my wife. My wife actually did an interview called Stay Hungry, and it's been a really popular episode. So finally, we have Steve Olson. And Steve created this amazing song. So I want to honor them. But what I want to do is explain to you that when you go to interview, you want to think about preparing them for the interview. So I call and spend about a half hour with them and talk them through it. And then when they come to the interview, we do a quick walkthrough. But the magic, the real magic, it happens in the green room. In the beginning of the interview, just hit record because you never know the gems that are come out of it. And at the end of the interview, keep going because a lot of times you'll get a contact from that, another chef or another person that could come on your podcast. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Michael. And as I said, you're free to put questions into the chat. I'll be the chat master for Michael. We did have one question about the mic. And if you could repeat the title, but I believe Robert Ripley put the details on how to find it. But go ahead and tell people what the one is you're using that you really like right now.
Sure. It's called the Shure. It's the Shure MV7.
Excellent. Any other questions? I have a comment. Someone says, I love that you have your wife included with your guests. And Michael and Carrie are both Toastmasters, so that's a pretty powerful combination. Any other questions? I have one here. How do I publish my podcast once I've got it organized?
Yeah, so there are lots of different places. Anchor is one. I think Libsyn is another. I use Buzzsprout, and Buzzsprout was recommended to me by Rebecca Murray, and I'm so grateful because Buzzsprout was the key to really understanding podcasting. They have such a huge infrastructure, but to publish, all you have to do is sign up with Buzzsprout. You go onto their website and you click on directories, and just from that specific spot, you can publish into 20 different podcasting directories that reach out to anyone in the world. And that includes Apple, Google, Spotify, lots of different directories.
Amazing. We had a quick question, which was, what foods seem to be the most popular on the podcast? Have you noticed a trend? You've chosen different chefs to interview. What are you finding so far with types of foods?
That is a really good question. We have a 3-part series going on right now with La Spiga, and they're Italian food. We've actually gone there in Seattle, and they're amazing. So I would say their cuisine, a lot of pasta. I would also say tapas from Clara Gutierrez Carroll. She's the executive chef of the Spanish Tapas restaurant in Bellevue. That's really popular. One of the things we do on the podcast is we ask them unique questions. So I always ask what your desert island dessert is, and the chefs get really into it and really descriptive. And so I would say the desserts are really popular too. Clara had a really amazing flan. It's like an orange flan. And tiramisu from La Spiga.
I don't know about everyone else, but I'm getting hungry just listening to this right now. We have a practical question. How many episodes should I start with?
So I would say what I have to share with you that's really what's so great about the Buzzsprout Facebook page is that when you go on there, everyone supports you and gives you really good advice from their experience. What I learned is you want to launch with 3 episodes because that gives you a lot of energy, and it also gets you registered. And if you have 3 going at the same time, your numbers go up a lot quicker. And that's what we did, was we launched with 3 episodes.
Awesome. If you have more questions, we'll be on until 8:30. If you want to private chat those questions to Michael, he'll have a few moments in a little bit here to answer a few. That will wrap up our question and answer. I'm not sure if you want to do your final re-question of that first thing, how you want to close, Michael. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share again one more time. And Mark Brown, who we've had here at District 2, he said, we all have a message to share, and there's someone out there that's ready to listen. My goal tonight was to inspire you to think about starting your own podcast and be creative and connect with a high performance leadership group. But choose wisely, choose people that are really passionate about your mission, your vision, and your values. And let me know, reach out to me and let me know if I can support you. Don't forget to grab your iPhone, grab your iPad, get on your computer and launch Voice for Chefs. Subscribe to us and really enjoy the experience.